Hey, Carol, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Eitan, it's great to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. I know you've been very, very busy. I mean, you've been traveling a
Yeah,
lot lately, right?
yes, it's that time of the year going into third and fourth quarter. The travel ramps up, which I always enjoy.
Yeah, you enjoyed it, right? I mean, it's fun, the fun part of the job, right? I guess.
Well, especially when we went through that dark period where um, we couldn't travel. So I don't take
Yes,
it for granted anymore.
yes. We are humans at the end of the day. We are social creatures. We need to meet and hug and all this oxytocin that's moving in our brain. It needs to be activated from time to time. Right.
I agree. And, in the industry, I've been really pleasantly surprised how many people want to attend in-person events.
Hmm.
There was a time where we thought maybe everything would stay virtual because, everybody just got used to it and it's undoubtedly more convenient. But to your point, people want to get out and meet, and there's just something magical that happens when you're in person.
Yes. So, Carol, you've been in the industry for many years. You're an expert in retail, e-commerce, working with companies all over, both on the brand side, retailers, the technology company themselves. Quite focused lately on the B2B side of things, retail expert. So maybe just give us an update for our listeners to get to know you better, who you are, and what are you doing.
Yeah, so I'm president of Spieckerman Retail, and I serve as an advisor to a crazy diverse group of retail stakeholders
Mm.
in the B2B space. And my primary role with the companies is to help them accelerate their thought leadership, to integrate their positioning with what really matters and is moving the needle in retail, and also to accelerate business development. And I do that through a couple of means. I have one-day workshops that I conduct where I coach companies on a 5-point methodology that I've developed. And that way, with no time to waste, we accomplish a lot in one day. And I
Mhm.
also have a distilled version of it that I present as a masterclass at events, keynotes and things like that. And then on the content side and the speaking side, I am constantly creating, tracking, and mapping what I call my retail trajectories. And
Mhm.
these are themes that I'm always, staying on top of and creating that create kind of a shorthand for all of the seemingly unconnected random things that are happening in retail. And they help these dynamics become actionable for the audiences that I speak with and also the clients that I work with. So they're the bridge from that thought leadership side to the work that I do on the advisory side.
Yes. So when people are reaching out to you, I mean, they need like a breakthrough on their business development side of things, on their thought leadership. What are the pain points or the main challenges that you know, identify that they reach out to you?
Well, all of the above. I
Okay.
think I sum it up as rethink, reframe, and retell. Rethink being sort of setting that baseline for what really matters in retail, getting past all the clutter and the noise, and talking about what's common, if you will, to all of the different companies that my clients want to do business with. That way, they're not reinventing the wheel every time they go after an opportunity.
Hmm.
Reframe is relevantly positioning the assets that they already have in the house. There's so many shiny objects out there right now vying for everyone's attention. And, I find that a lot of companies have sort of an imposter syndrome where they're like, oh, we're I'm sure there's a million things that we should be doing that we're not doing. But the first order of business, and something that's really powerful and fundamental to what I do, is to relevantly position what you're already doing and get full credit for it. And then I find that companies make a lot better decisions about what they do next once they optimize what's already there.
Yeah.
And then retell is that business development acceleration piece. So those same 5 steps that guide the positioning strategy also are sequenced into a business development process that's very efficient and allows companies to vet opportunities very quickly and not, again, throw the kitchen sink at every so-called opportunity, but have a much more efficient process for that. So all of that's integrated together. And my clients will say that they're focused on one, maybe a little bit more than the other, but they understand that they all work together synergistically. And so that's why they're combined in the platform positioning workshops
Yeah.
and master classes.
So, Carol, I'm very interested in career paths. We talk a lot about the retail side of things and your business, and definitely we spend time on it. But it's very interesting, how you started. What was your first job?
Well, I'll say my first big job in retail was there was a time when there were a lot of what they called marts in the U.S., which were apparel marts and general merchandise marts and
Hmm.
whatever. So I worked at one of the big ones in Dallas, Texas, which you may hear from my accent,
Hmm.
my beginnings. And I lobbied really, really hard to get my first sales territory with the company I was working for. And they delivered. I was traveling thousands of miles every year across Texas, Oklahoma, and
Wow.
some pretty big real estate, working with hundreds of specialty stores. This was, not before Walmart, but before retailers like Walmart really were starting to take a big bite,
Hmm.
out of the business. And there were all these specialty stores and all these different regional markets that I worked with, hundreds of them. And I would load up a cargo van with over 25 giant rolling cases filled with samples and set them up in hotels. And every weekend I was at some Dust Bowl city working with these lovely store owners that were just, really serious about their business. And it was wonderful. I loved it. And it just taught me so much about how to work with people, about how to collaborate with folks, and just the real grassroots needs
Yeah.
of entrepreneurial businesses. Then from there, I was steadily promoted to where I was working with some of the biggest department stores on the West Coast. I moved to LA. I had accounts in Hawaii and San Francisco, and I was at New York Market Week constantly. So that's when I started working with a lot of the big guys. And then later in my career, I became known as a specialist for these retailers that were tough nuts to crack. Retailers like Walmart, retailers like J.C. Penney, even at the time, that had a decentralized buying market, and people couldn't figure out how to make all that add up. So they would say, "Hey, call Carol, and she can come in
Yes,
and crack the
secret
code."
weapon, right?
Yeah, I was a secret weapon for a lot of companies, and managed big portfolios of brands, and in some cases got very involved in the licensing and intellectual property space, where I had binders this thick, filled with all of these properties and their different, you know, characteristics, and was selling them to all kinds of different retailers. So it's a really, really diverse background. But what it allowed me to understand is that regardless that a lot of times categories really are not that special, and that a lot of things just become common best practices in retail. And I started distilling those best practices for others, and helping them. And I realized that I had an ability to help a lot more people by starting my own business back in 2020, 2002. So those were my humble beginnings as a road warrior, and really, have loved the journey all along the way, and really love being able to help more people now.
Yes. I mean, it's amazing journey. So what's driving you? I mean, this is like a self-learner, enjoy learning about new things. There is like an inherent motivation to do things. There is maybe a certain boss or a mentor that push you through those years. What driving your success?
Well, I have to be honest, I had to be self-driven for quite a
Okay.
while, because, it was a very, I started out in kids wear, and even shockingly in that business, it was a very male dominated business. I was the only woman salesperson, a lot of places where I went, the only sales manager, later on, the only VP. So I had to sort of boldly make my own way. And, in a way it was a good thing, because there weren't any templates.
Mhm.
I just kind of had to make it my own.
Yeah.
But I did have some really wonderful mentors, and got, really good advice, later in my career, especially working with some of those big departments and department stores, and some of the legends that had started them. But what really motivates me is giving these companies that I work with confidence, where, they have that kind of, well, we know a lot about what we do, and we just can't wait to talk about what we do. But the retail thing, I mean, I don't know
Hmm.
if we have enough confidence in that space to really be thought leaders, or to feel as though we can just be conversant with retail. It can be
Hmm.
overwhelming. And when you give them the tools to actually do that and then integrate it with their positioning and do it in a way that's very easy to sort of lather, rinse, repeat, um, it's just exciting because you see that
Yeah.
confidence come up and you see it permeate their all of their teams, in sales and marketing, and it gets everybody excited about taking new approaches, and excited about not just pitching what they do, but really talking about retail and having those more strategic conversations that lead to bigger programs. So
Yeah.
it never gets old.
Of course. Of course. So, what are some of the steps that you do helps them to go to this transition?
Well, the first step, as I'd mentioned before, is to look at all of the assets that they already have on their platforms. And by the way, that's my fundamental premise, is that retailers are no longer just places that sell stuff. They're now platforms that contain data, acquisitions, new business models,
Hmm.
partnerships, all kinds of new positions on their platforms that just weren't there before. So it's no longer just about selling stuff to retailers. And that fundamental premise changes everything about how these companies should position for opportunities. I tell them that they are positioning, again, not as a company that's selling something, but they are positioning platform to platform and talking about how they can integrate their platform assets and capabilities with those of their retail partners.
Hmm.
And so the 5-step process, the first order of business is to integrate that thought leadership into their premise. In other words, start off by talking about what you see in retail, what you understand is happening in retail, and then later move into how your solution or product integrates with those dynamics. When these companies take that approach and sort of delay the pitch, if you will, not only does it create a lot of confidence for them, it creates a lot of confidence in the folks that they're working with, because they realize, hey, these guys they understand the context of the environment in which they're working. And, they're not just solutions in search of a problem.
Hmm.
So the first thing we do is really get that confidence in some of those thought leadership pieces, in many cases through my retail trajectories, which I encourage companies to shamelessly borrow and use. And then to start creating relevant hierarchies around a lot of the ideas and marketing concepts that maybe they've already developed. I work with companies that have tremendous marketing and really great messaging, but in some cases, or in a lot of cases, it's all sort of on one level and it's all out there.
Hmm.
There's no sequencing. There's one is like no more important than the other. And so a lot of times it's just getting what's already there and saying, let's talk about what's front and center. Let's talk about the ideas that are supporting ideas, and let's just organize all of that to where it tells a relevant story and to where you can tell it in a much more efficient way across your platform. So
Yeah. So these are like
that's a lot of the foundational work.
yes. So the first step is like this thought leadership. So this is you if I understand you correctly, you talk about content creation. Like, is it like in the form of of writing content, reading content, or is it like videos, or what are the, or you try to adapt to each one of those leaders, or what's worked best for each?
Well, one of the top requests that I'm getting over the last year, I would say, is I have had more companies come to me and say some version of, we want to be more than just a vendor. So in many cases, they're trying to create their own thought leadership platforms.
Mm.
They want to be writing blogs. They want to be creating videos or starting a
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
Just something that, again, gets them away from just being another vendor pitching services and solutions. So in some cases, I do help companies with that. But foundationally, you want to do the positioning work first, before you do that. Because then, you have the ammunition, if you will, to start telling those stories across all of those different venues.
Hmm.
So no two are taking the same approach, but thought leadership it's something I've been banging on about for, almost 20 years. And now it's really coming to where people are literally requesting that by name. We want to be thought leaders. We want to speak at this event. We want to create our own content. We want to build out our own platform of authority, not just be a company that's selling something to retailers and brands in some cases.
Yes. And how do you identify, like key messaging? Obviously, it's better to be different than to be better, right? So how do you how do you identify, you analyze the current marketing messaging and try to come up with more improvement? How this process works?
Yeah, exactly. We do look at the current messaging, and what I find is it's not about saying, "Oh, that's terrible, that goes away." More than anything, it's a lot of times it's, "Hey, that may be your primary messaging, but it probably belongs down here as a supporting idea."
Yeah.
And also too, companies that have been around for a few years, they get a lot of input, and it's really hard to, as they say in some circles, kill your babies. It's hard to say, no, we're not going to use that anymore.
Yeah.
And so things have a way of getting very bloated. And I've seen decks that have 1,500 slides.
Wow.
Companies that are just like, no, we can't get rid of any of it. We need to have it all there somewhere. And they have these big, what I call repositories of messaging and data and all of that. And again, a lot of it's very usable, but you can't just have it all in one big space, all on one level. It needs to be sequenced. It needs to be relevant hierarchies need to be created, and it needs to be integrated and aligned with what's happening out there, outside of their company. And it's really not that hard. It's not as hard as you would think to do it once, you follow the 5 steps, because the 5 steps are essentially buckets that you can put that information in, and it becomes very clear what belongs where, and what might be ready to not be used anymore and might be getting a little bit long in the tooth. So
I know.
But once there's a process for it, everybody kind of tends to get on board, and they're like, yeah, we can give that up.
Yeah, it's not easy to say no. Right? I mean, a lot of leaders, they fell in love with the products, with the messaging, and it's not important. What's important is customer pains and challenges. How do you confront them, right? So, I mean, the process of saying no and letting go is something which is probably also an emotional process, I guess, that you know how to manage, obviously, and a lot of egos involved.
Yep, and that can be true as well. But that's why it's really helpful when I do my workshops in particular that we have representatives from each of the main areas within the company. Even HR. The other day I had somebody from HR say, I never get invited to these things, and it was so helpful to me to hear some of these trajectories you're talking about and to really understand why we're in the business that we're in. It just really helps me do my job better. So definitely marketing teams, sales teams, and executive teams. And once everybody gets buy-in and they see, again, they start feeling that confidence as we go through the process, then they're like, they can kind of, if you will, get weaned off of some of these older ideas or some of these processes that they've never questioned, but that just really are not as valuable to their business as maybe they once were.
Yes, and exactly. Things are changing so fast right now. And once you launch a product and it was fine or good for maybe 10 years, now it's maybe if it's 18 months in action, then maybe it's a great success. So you need to move fast, change things, even break things along the way, but just move on and do, evaluate what's happening and change. So let's talk about those retail trajections. I mean, what have you identified and what do you see in the market right now?
Well, I mean, at any given time, I'm tracking 30 or 40 trajectories.
Wow.
And when I give presentations, the great thing about that is I never give the same presentation twice because I'm always curating them based on the audience, based on, the goals of a particular event or a particular client. But I do have some that are sort of foundational that have withstood the test of time. And what I find too is a lot of the trajectories are interwoven. So there may be one that is sort of an umbrella trajectory, and then it's supported by several others. Right now, I just started talking about a new one for this year that I'm calling Launch and Learn. And I just did a podcast on this.
Mm-hmm.
And what it is it's just a seemingly small change in how technology is being introduced in the retail space, and particularly in brick and mortar, where we went from test and launch to launch and learn. And the difference is retailers used to, work behind closed doors, perfecting all kinds of new, technologies or new processes, and they wouldn't really launch it until they felt like they had it at a pretty advanced stage. Well, these days, retailers and brands are pushing out technology before the training wheels are off.
Yeah.
And they are live testing a lot of this technology with consumers. So it's a necessary shift on some level, to what you were saying earlier, with things changing so fast, you can't afford to just incubate ideas forever. But it's a little problematic when there's a disconnect between retailers' intentions and what consumers understand to be happening. Consumers, by and large, are still in the mindset that any technology that they see in a store or elsewhere wouldn't be out there if they hadn't already perfected it.
Yeah.
Or at least attempted to. And they don't realize that they're sort of being guinea pigs and live testing a lot of this technology before all the kinks are worked out. So I do think sometimes that communication gap between retailers' intentions and new processes and consumers' ongoing expectations that haven't been questioned can be problematic. And that's when you get a lot of consumer complaints and all of that kind of thing. So I don't know that it's a fatal situation, but retailers do have to tread very lightly, I think, and have to be careful about just how unfinished some of these technologies are before they put them out in the consumer environment.
Yes, that's like I like to say that brainstorming is overrated, right? So I mean, just go there. Like me coming from a tech background for the last 20 years, like the lean startup model, that's for me like a common practice, right? You develop some kind of an MVP. It doesn't have to include all your fantasies and everything that you like in terms of feature set. Just go there, try to answer a very specific pain point, work with your customers, iterate on a daily basis, right? And try to find the right product definition that makes a difference, and then land and expand from there, right? Expand the functionalities, expand the customer base, and grow together with customer feedback. So the whole idea of product management or the real understanding what customer really wants, and the quick agility and adaptation and being so flexible in terms of your product is like very, very critical for this process, right? And so this is like very natural on the tech sector, but probably not the way things are working on the retail side.
Yes, and I really do think it's just a matter of expectations. And you had mentioned like getting feedback from customers. I think that can help. Is to say we want your feedback, which instantly lets consumers know that this is something that's being tested, not something that is being portrayed as being perfected.
Yes,
but I think that in some ways can be sort of a minor hiccup, but some of the adjacent trajectories that go along with that is I talk about how high tech drives high touch, or that's the ideal situation, because one of the biggest conundrums right now in retail, one of the biggest balancing acts that retailers are having to execute is striking that balance between high tech and high touch. With all the clickbait and all the, black and white thinking that drives a lot of headlines, the conversation tends to be, well, is technology going to replace people? Well, and of course the answer is it depends. And it also depends, on how long. I always say that the transitions between now and next actually tend to go on longer than most people think. And that will include a lot of this high tech versus high touch transition.
Yeah.
But right now, the best situation, and I think what retailers really are striving for, is for a lot of these high tech solutions, again, particularly brick and mortar, to enable people powered processes to become more efficient and to engage even more with customers and engage
Mhm.
with them in a more meaningful way. It
Yes,
isn't just about completely eliminating people and people powered processes. It's about optimizing them and making them better. So I think that's the ideal situation and the balance that retailers are trying to strike.
interesting. So for you, innovation, I mean, comes together with human connection, human feedback, interactions with real people. Nice, interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, you mentioned that retail is becoming platform. Just look at like in the retail media opportunity, for example, they must become like an advertising platform right now, right? So
Yeah.
like Amazon obviously moves very fast, and probably Walmart. But look at there is a long tail of retailers that it's very very slow. That transition
Yeah.
takes a lot of time.
Well,
Yeah.
and that points to one of my biggest trajectories too, which is really a mandate in retail right now: diversify or die.
Okay.
And that means I've been saying that retail's growth engine of the future is diversification. And we're already seeing this happening as retailers diversify into all these new business models,
Hmm.
going into healthcare, financial services, and yes, the big one, retail media, because
Yeah.
it's such a profit center. And, and then along with that, another trajectory, the solutions and services shift, which is retailers shifting away from focusing so much on selling products and looking at how they can monetize their platforms through, through services and solutions, and with retail media falling in that category.
Hmm.
So it's really interesting now when you're looking at some of these big guys like Walmart and you're hearing their earnings reports and looking at those transcripts, and you're seeing that there's just not that same anxiety, when sales are down in
Yeah.
certain product categories. And then you turn around and you see this double digit growth in retail media and some other places, and it explains it. So it's
Yeah.
a powerful hedge against a lot of those headwinds that retailers have traditionally experienced on the product side of the business, whether that's inflation, whether it's supply chain challenges, labor shortages,
Hmm.
and so on. So
Yeah.
solutions and services is going to be one of the biggest diversification plays out there. And the biggest threat, I think, to a lot of retailers right now is lack of diversification.
Hmm. I fully agree, right? They must diversify. It's clear. But we learned all those years that once you're in trouble, you need to focus, right? Just get rid of all the noise, focus on your best products, your best markets, make it more profitable, just zoom in and make the strong stronger, right? On the other side, you
Yeah.
must diversify because things are changing so fast. And this is probably one of the biggest challenges of obviously retailers and companies these days, right? So on one side, they need to be profitable because this is what the investors and all the market is expecting. But in order to diversify, you need to invest. You need to invest in innovation.
Yeah.
It's which kind of a longer term approach. So how do you balance these two trends?
Well, and I've been saying too that it's interesting. There's so many. One of my other top trajectories is buy, build, or bridge, which is the dynamic that retailers want. Another big decision point for them is when it makes more sense to make outright acquisitions, when to build solutions internally, or when to lean into those platform partnerships.
Hmm.
And increasingly, I'm seeing, and this is great news for all those solution providers out there that are rushing into retail, retailers are very much favoring partnerships because it's a much more agile model. You don't have to buy the farm to get the
Yeah.
capabilities that you need. And so there are all of these great third-party providers out there. Retailers have never been more open to working with them. But to your point, it can get a little busy and a little noisy out there. And so I've
Yeah.
been saying that we've gone very quickly from a conversation about possibilities. Not that long ago, it was like, can we even do that? Is this possible? Well, now just about everything's
Yeah.
possible. So it has to be about setting relevant priorities.
Yes.
And it's really a be careful what you wish for situation because, before it was, gee, I wonder if we could ever get that done. And again, there'll be some third party provider out there that'll say, hey, we can do that. We'll help you. And so then it becomes, well, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
So there's also a certain amount of restraint that has to happen. Again, with so many options out there for retailers and brands, it's a real opportunity to make it your own because there are no templates. No two are doing the same thing anymore. But it can also get very confusing and you have to make really good decisions. And again, to your point, not diversify so much as to lose focus on the core of your business and what
Yeah.
really makes the difference.
Yes. And I think technology is like the basic of everything that we've discussed, because with technology, you can launch fast, get feedback, kill it, or expand it, right? It doesn't have to take years. It can take few months that you can get that feedback. Okay, it's very easy to kill it or very easy to continue investing in this and make it a success. So like definitely technology, and that's another of the transition that they need to do. Become a technology companies, use technology platforms, work with partners, as you said, which is again an amazing opportunities for the industry, and experiment quickly, get the data. Obviously, AI is important here. So technology, I think, is like in the cornerstone of everything that we've been discussing. Wow, Carol, amazing, really interesting.
Well, and it was interesting. A gentleman that I spoke with recently on my podcast that I really liked what he said, and he was talking about AI specifically.
Mhm.
He said, you do not need to know how it works, but you do need to start working with it. So, that's the whole thing. There are people out there
For
who
sure.
can help you. And to your point, all driven by technology.
Mhm.
They're more than happy to help. They can walk you through it. They can make it happen. You don't have to know how the sausage is made, as they say, but it's really not an excuse to just sit it out. And and your business, I think, is such a really embodiment of what we're talking about, because if I understand correctly, you diversified out of some of the entertainment work that you did, and that foundation of your business.
Mhm.
And you're like, well, we could parlay this into shoppable media and things like that.
Exactly.
And it was a logical stretch, but there really weren't any guarantees
Sure.
that it was going to work. And I think that's a really great case study in how that can work, is to say, looking at those core capabilities and then how do they naturally parlay into some of these dynamics that are more future seeking and where retail's going.
Yeah, this
So
is like again coming back to where we started. Understand what you have, what are your real assets, where is the real moat,
yes,
right? Trying to align it with an opportunity out there that is in the market. And this is what we did at FIMI, and probably this is what you suggest to all your customers.
right. And it doesn't mean you're reinventing the wheel.
No, no,
It's just a
you
different
don't
use
need to.
case. And yeah. And that's
Yeah.
that's a lot of the work that I do with my clients. And you would think a lot of it is obvious, but it's only obvious once you do it and look back.
Great, Carol. So share with us a fun fact about you.
A fun fact about me,
Yeah.
golly. Well, I took up mountain biking this year, and
Wow.
I don't know. It's becoming so ubiquitous now. I don't know that I could say that that's unusual, but it's something that was on what I call my never list. I had absolutely no interest in learning mountain biking, no interest
Wow.
in doing it, and then all of a sudden, I happened to be living in one of the mountain biking capitals of the world, and it's emerged as such very quickly
Yeah.
here in Northwest Arkansas. And I got a bike, and then I got the bug, and I love it.
Amazing. So we need to schedule some point of time, because I've been doing mountain biking for like 15 years, been riding like 2, 3 times a week. So yeah, it's really interesting that you're just started. So congratulations
Well,
and welcome.
thank
Yeah.
you. Well, and you may know that we had a bunch of tornadoes out this way that
Mhm.
did, of course, were really unfortunate for a lot of people and damaging their homes and trees down everywhere.
Yep.
But unfortunately, the trails are pretty much ruined
Okay.
for a while, and we've got big crews out here trying to clean up the trails. But yeah, I'm heading to Colorado for one of my
Wow.
mountain biking jaunts in a couple of weeks, and really looking forward to it.
Great. Carol, anything else you want to add?
Gosh, no, I think that's it. And it's just such a pleasure speaking with you. And I'm such an admirer of your business and really enjoy following your progress too. And my hat's off to you too for being probably one of the most prolific podcasters out there.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you, Carol. Thank you. It was a pleasure having you here. Really, really interesting. I wish you all the best.
Thank
Again,
you.
and great success on the business and mountain biking as well.
You bet.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye.